I believe that's a common misconception, and it's a valid one. Is technology making us dumber? Is it making us reliant on technology? There's a difference between usable technology and distraction technology.
This is A Joyful Rebellion, the podcast that explores that moment you realize the life and success you worked so hard to create didn't come with all the fulfillment you thought it would. I'm your host, James Walters, and I want you to be the author of your own story. Each week, I connect with people who inspire bold answers to the question, what do I do now to create a life I love? If you're ready to start answering that question for yourself, you're in the right place. So let's start a joyful rebellion. Some people follow a plan while others walk straight into the unknown with nothing but curiosity and drive. Stephen Zeller did exactly that again and again. Stephen is a serial entrepreneur, technologist, and futurist who's built, lost, and rebuilt businesses while chasing what he calls productive discomfort. With no formal business background, he made his first million young, and then he lost it just as quickly. That experience didn't break him. It actually became fuel for everything he built next. Today, Stephen sits at the intersection of technology, biology, and bold innovation, offering rare insight into where we're headed next. In this conversation, we talk about how failure became Stephen's best mentor, why iteration is the secret to both business and life, and what happens when you swap comfort for curiosity. From AI ethics to human potential, from the future of genetic engineering to the emotional toll of entrepreneurship, this one covers a lot of ground. Whether you're navigating a hard season or dreaming of what's next for you, this talk is a reminder that discomfort isn't a detour. It's often the path itself. Stephen Zeller, thank you for being here on A Joyful Rebellion.
Pleasure to be here, James. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. And I thought it was really interesting when I read about your background because it seems to me, and you know all the facts, but it seems to me that you had a series of joyful rebellions pretty early in life. And what I mean by that is this whole podcast is about that time in life where you kind of have a decision to make. You realize that you don't love where you are and you want more life out of life. Then you have to figure out, okay, what do I do next? Yep. And sometimes what you have to do next is sort of rebel against the things you've already known or done or felt comfortable doing. In reading through your upbringings, through your early years, you were raised as part of a big family out in the Midwest. How many siblings do you have?
6 of us total.
Where do you fall in age in that mix?
Right in the middle. So You know what they say about middle children.
Who was that on Brady Bunch? I think it was Jan, because she was always like Marsha. Anyway, before a lot of people's time. So you were in this family and you had a decision. Okay, you were going to go to school, or you were, after high school, you were going to go to college, or you were going to go into the entrepreneurial world. You chose the less defined route. And I want to talk a little bit about why that was. Yeah. And was there something that was going on being part of a big family? I'm the oldest of 5. And there was a point where I was like 18 getting out of high school, and I was I'm ready to get the hell out of here. I'm all good with this family thing for a minute. I want to get into this work thing and into this, seeing what I can do thing. What was it for you that kind of propelled you into the entrepreneurial life so early?
Good question. And I wish I had a definitive answer for what the specific catalyst was that really went into the determination that I ended up making. So upon self-reflection, you start thinking, why did I make that decision? Why did I decide to go down this route instead of this route? And I've had a lot of defining moments already. I'm only in my mid-30s, so I still think there's going to be a few more yet in the near-term and long-term future. That said, when you want to pinpoint a specific catalyst that was the determining factor, I can't give you one. The one thing that I can tell you is, as a teenager, I was always driven for more, growing up in a humble lifestyle where you see all of the wealth and prosperity and the people that are moving and shaking and creating and doing things, and something just told me that I needed to be doing. I needed to be creating. I needed to be doing more. I had an affinity that I couldn't really put my finger on for technology that I didn't really have access to at the time. Didn't have all the gadgets growing up or the sophisticated top of the line computers or anything like that. But I was always drawn towards technology and specifically researching the human body. I was always fascinated by the complexity of biology. So there was one key point, and this wasn't necessarily the first decision I had to make. It was after a couple iterations, I started business without knowing anything about business, just kind of jumped in and had some early success. But the one thing that I can tell you is I was at this pivotal moment in my life where I could go one of two ways. One was go to 14 plus years of school to be a neurosurgeon, which the human brain was absolutely fascinating to me. I knew that would be a great path. I could do a lot of good there. Hats off to all the neurosurgeons out there. You are working your tails off with very little sleep. I know what you have to go through, and we couldn't be here without you. But for me, the main reason that I think I went the other way was I felt I could do more good taking the riskier approach. Betting on myself, betting that I could create and touch and change more lives, going the entrepreneurial route as opposed to going through all of that schooling, coming out in debt, and then my life would be pretty much planned out for the remainder of it, right? So I believe that not necessarily the catalyst, but that was what drove me towards entrepreneurship. The ability to take that risk that I could fall flat on my face, but I'm not capped in the capabilities in what I can achieve. It's really on me to succeed or fail. That was what made me choose the entrepreneurial journey.
Got it. And in your family, in your upbringing, I'm just curious, were there people who were encouraging you to take this path? Because a lot of times your family, what they want for you, or it's been my experience anyway, they want that safety, that security. And sometimes to them, depending on how they were raised, they might steer you to something that they understand.
Yeah.
And that could hold you back. What was it like for you when you said, you know what, I think I'm going to go figure this out and I'm going to go start some businesses? Who was the first person to put their opinion in the ring?
Never really had a support system growing up. Grew up in a very religious household where the ideologies that I didn't necessarily conform to or believe in was somewhat problematic for me when I decided to go down my path. That wasn't necessarily leading to an ostracization, but it did create a little bit of separation. So I never really had moral support from family, friends, anything like that. And you hit the nail on the head. One quote that I've seen, and I can't remember who said it, might have been Morgan Freeman, but it was an actor. I do know that. So I take it with a grain of salt, but it was a great quote. No offense to all the actors out there. Please don't hate me for saying it. But the quote was, when you go down the path of breaking the generational curse, is how they worded it, your own family will often go against you and talk shit about you. And that is definitely what occurred in my own experience. And I don't think that is universal. I think that there's a lot of people out there that will garner the support of their family, their friends. Now, it's when you deviate from what's expected, that is when you're going to meet resistance. Inevitably, it happens every single time. Now, that resistance in some families or circles of friends might be temporary, and then it will start to change once they say, okay, this person's serious, I'm going to support it even though I don't understand it. But more often than not, if you are going against the grain, if your decisions aren't something that your family and friends deem to be safe, deem to be responsible, which taking a risk is often viewed as an irresponsible move to a lot of people who have never done it and don't understand it. So when you go about breaking that generational curse and want to make something of yourself and you take that risk, you got to be prepared for the inevitable backlash that's going to occur. For me, I had to have a tremendous amount of mental resilience because I didn't have that support system. I didn't have anyone pushing me and propelling me. I didn't have any financial backing outside of what I could generate for myself. So, in my perspective, is one of the driving forces because I knew that what I was doing mattered. What the underlying reasons for those or the potential catalysts were for them, that's not necessarily something I initially knew, but I knew that I wanted more. I knew that it mattered, and I knew that I needed to go out and achieve it, regardless of what my family and friends were saying.
Yeah. My whole reason for bringing that up and digging into it a little bit is the fact that it sounds like you didn't have that encouragement. You didn't have those people around you. You're going into this unknown thing. It sounds like you had a ton of intuition about it. You didn't know why you liked this particular thing, but you were going to go try it out. You got into business. You didn't know anything about business. You kind of learned it in real time. Did you have anyone, like friends, like people you picked up along the way? Because that's one of the things you get in, like if you go to college, university, your family's not there anymore. You get to be a new person if you want to be, but then you also have these people who are kind of around in the same situation as you, and they can at least say, hey, hope it goes well or good luck on the test, but you didn't have any of that. Was there anybody who in those challenging times when you were like, man, I don't know if this is going to work, and they say, just keep pushing, or was it just you?
Unfortunately, there were. So you are the average of the people that you spend the most time with. And your circle is going to change, and it should constantly be evolving. You are going to have those good, solid relationships, whether it's family, whether you meet somebody through school or through college, right? And you just have a genuine relationship with them, and they're going to support you no matter what you do. Those are amazing to have. But in most cases, especially in entrepreneurship, as you level up, your network also simultaneously will or should level up. Your relationships will change. Your partners will change. So initially, to answer your question, the people that I surrounded myself, because I didn't know any better, were not necessarily good influences. So I actually went down a path initially where I made money in scrupulous ways that there's also a lot of regret there in later years. Like, why did I do that? Why? And to be honest, you can't beat yourself up for making decisions that you thought were in your best interest when you don't know any better. So the initial people that were propelling me forward and giving me the encouragement were actually detrimental to my long-term success. And I didn't realize that until a few years later. It's funny when those people that are supporting you and cheering you on, and then the second you hit a hiccup and you fail, you stumble, which is also an inevitability of the entrepreneurial journey. It's not a constant upward trajectory. It never is for anyone. You're going to have challenges. You're going to have obstacles that you face. You're going to have failures. You're going to have lawsuits. So these are all things that when it happens, you really know who your actual legitimate, genuine friends are because they show their face very quickly. So that's what happened to me. I stumbled, I lost, so I made my first million relatively quickly at a young age, didn't know how to manage my finances, ended up losing it very quickly as well. And then that friend group that was propelling me and cheering me on and giving me the support evaporated. Incredible how that happens. So no, I would say now I have an incredible group that is constantly surrounding me and propelling me forward. They're constantly calling and saying, hey, what are you getting into? That's amazing. Let me tell you about this opportunity over here. And we all support each other's growth, and we really legitimately want to see each other succeed, not necessarily just in it when you're up. So that's something that's developed over time. Initially, at the beginning, I put myself in a position where I was surrounded by people that were dragging me down or giving me wrong influence and advice. So that's something that I had to learn as well, kind of just like in business, I had to learn that on the fly as well, is how to develop actual real relationships with people that mattered and were genuine.
That's one of those hindsight is 2020 situations.
Always.
Yeah. And something you said, but also something I read in your bio. We're leading up to this because it says here in your bio that you know what it's like to be so broke that McDonald's is out of the budget, and you also know what it's like to go shopping for jets and private islands. And that takes me back to a guy I like to read his stuff. His name's Mark Manson. Have you heard of him?
Yeah.
The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. That's the first book I read by him. And he says, everyone's got problems. Everyone. You never escape problems. And poor people have poor people problems. Millionaires have millionaire problems. Billionaires have billionaire problems. And they're all different problems, but they all have problems.
Choose your problem. What problems do you want?
Yeah. He's like, choose your problem, because married people have married people problems, and single people, they got single people problems. And what we're talking about here is you have gone through, just like every human has gone through a series of problems, and you've gotten pretty good about picking the ones that you want to stick out and the ones that you want
to... A series of unfortunate events, some might say.
Yeah. So let's expand on that just a little bit. When you get into business, you've made your first million, you've lost your first million, you learned a lot in that process. You learned how to build it, you learned how you lost it. What did you do different the day after you realized, man, I built this thing and then I lost this thing, and that was fast? What were your next steps?
In all honesty, you take a second to mourn the loss and feel bad for yourself, right? That's just part of the process. You grieve a little bit, and then you start beating yourself up and wondering, what did I do wrong? And then you actually turn that into a productive assessment. No. Not what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? So that I don't repeat it in the future. Now I have this experience. I know how to build a business. I know what not to do. Taking that and building on it and just finding another opportunity. So the beautiful thing is I've always been agnostic to specific niches or verticals. I am always looking for what's the next opportunity. Where do I see value? And in many cases, you have to learn a new skill to be able to impart that value or provide that value. But once you achieve a basic template, to every rule there's an exception, but it's almost universally applicable. So once you have a working model, a working template, there's many optimizations that you do through iterations. I mean, ChatGPT, look at that. The first iteration wasn't that great. You learn how to optimize and how to code better. And then every iteration is going to be a little bit better than the last. And that's what my experience has been. Not every business venture is going to be a success, but you learn to test very quickly, get market validations. Like, I have a good idea, I'm going to put the pieces together, but before I spend a lot of money or go out and raise capital, before I do anything crazy that is really hard to walk back, I need to figure out what's the cheapest way to validate my assumptions that this is going to work. Is the demand there? Would people pay for this? Are other people doing it? Is it something I can replicate, or do I have to start from scratch and build the processes and systems? Once you realize that business is actually relatively easy to test, especially in the age of the internet, significantly easier, and you find an opportunity, you find something that's already working, you can easily replicate it as long as there's a sufficient demand, and then you differentiate yourself. So I know I'm kind of getting off topic there, but the way that you go from a failure and then you take the woe is me mentality and you turn it into something that is positive. And unfortunately, this is where a lot of entrepreneurs quit. They can't get through. There's two reasons. One is it's such a powerful emotion. Losing sucks. But guess what? It's part of the game. And if you're so afraid to lose that you can't pick yourself up and get back into it, you should not be an entrepreneur, and you need to stick to a 9-to-5 job. The other thing is you haven't mentally prepared for it in advance. Nobody told you that, hey, this is not going to be something where you hit the ground running and it's hunky-dory and gravy for the rest of your existence. You're going to hit plateaus. You're going to hit challenges. So you have to develop and prepare mentally for those circumstances so that when they occur, you have the fortitude and the capability to pick yourself up, take what you learned, apply it to your next venture.
That's hard for a lot of people to do. That's hard. That's been hard in parts of my life for me to do. That's getting easier as I get a little older. I don't know what that's all about.
Experience.
Kind of weird. Yeah, I told somebody a couple months ago, I turned 50 last year, and I said, some magical weird thing about turning that age is like you realize nothing's killed you yet. So if something big comes up, you can probably figure it out. And then eventually something will get you. But at this point, I don't even worry about it because I've been through so many trials. It's like, okay, I made it through all the other ones. Let's go. What you got? And one thing that I found fascinating, you were just describing business and you were talking about iteration and you were talking about being creative. It's not much different from life. You try a little something different with your life. You make that iteration, and it's like I've heard people talk about themselves. Let's say somebody's name's Brian, and I've heard people say, "Yeah, I'm in my Brian 3.0 phase," and I was like, "Okay, they're not a kid anymore. Maybe they've been through some job stuff, some relationship stuff, and now they've come out on the other side and they've grown through it, and so now they're just a completely different version of it, and they want to sound like their software, and so that's cool." So
hey, it's easy to make the correlation
Yeah.
between iterations of software development and your personal life. It's a good analogy.
and Brian, I don't know who you are, but if you're out there, we're proud of you, man. Keep going.
Keep going, Brian.
Yeah, so
I want to see Brian 4.0.
4.0, it's coming up next season. Hopefully, maybe not. Some seasons take longer, but I want to talk now. We talked about past. We kind of talked about where you came from, and I wanted to set it up that way because what I want to talk about now is your passion for technology and kind of the intersection of where technology I guess is where technology works with the body, the biology, and where they come together and what that could look like in the next 5 years, 10 years, because I've been to a couple of conferences, and in my job, what I do with branding and media, I get to dip into the lives of corporations. And I went to a big IT conference for a huge health insurance provider. And you don't think about health insurance provider, but they have there were probably 700 IT people who work for them that were in this room at this conference. And so, of course, they had a whole slew of people talking about AI and all the different technologies that were coming up. The year before, it was interesting because the whole topic was about personal health, meaning all the wearables, all the things that could predict maybe a certain outcome for a patient months or years ahead of time. Whereas if they just went to the doctor every couple of months, the doctor wouldn't be able to catch it like an Apple Watch with a certain kind of app could. And then it was funny to me because 10 years is when I first started attending this conference and working with their media team. It was funny to hear the whole thing was about cloud computing and how we were going to be able to process things in cloud. It wouldn't have to be on your local desktop computer. And I was like, my God, how far have we come where...
And that was only 10 years ago.
10 years ago, it was about cloud computing, and now it's about all this crazy stuff. Pull back the curtain, give us a little glimpse into the future.
Ooh, fun one. I like it.
When will the robots take over? And where are we on the timeline of our own self-destruction with AI?
There we go. Terminator style. Good question. And obviously not enough time in this segment to cover everything, but just as a transition point for where I'm at currently and why I'm even having this discussion is technology is a passion of mine. And as I referenced earlier, always been fascinated by biology, the human body. So I'm luckily in a point now where I get to marry my two passions of entrepreneurship and biological technology. There's multiple things that are rapidly developing. As you referenced just a second ago, when do robots take over? I don't think robots are going to be taking over anytime soon. You are going to see a very fast integration of agentic AI, which is virtual, and then also simultaneously humanoid robots entering the workforce. These are going to be for mundane, repetitive tasks. Just because the reasoning capabilities, I think we're going to hit a plateau. A lot of people are considering a potential doomsday scenario just because of the rapid rate of progression of these large language models like ChatGPT, you have XAI, you have Llama 3 from Meta and Anthropic, all these different competing platforms. And now you have China jumping into the game with their DeepSeek and multiple different platforms that are all competing for eyeballs. But the thing that I think is going to happen is we're talking about compute, ones and zeros. We've already gotten to the point where you can't feed any more data. We've already exhausted all of the data that we have generated as humans in our history, and we fed that into these large language model compute. So there's really not a whole lot more that they can learn and absorb. Now we can get incrementally better, but where I think we're going to fall short, and this might be good for the doomsdayers out there and the people that are afraid of the robot takeover, I'm not afraid of an overlord in the imminent future. We're talking about the next 5 to 10 years, because I think we're going to see a little bit of a plateau in the learning capabilities and reasoning capabilities. That is a threshold that is going to be very hard for ones and zeros to bypass. Because you think about how the human brain works, right? You're talking about a sophistication that runs off of 20 watts of energy. Extremely efficient, but the compute power is insane. You're talking 86 billion neurons in your skull and trillions of synaptic connections, and even more, trillions and trillions every millisecond of chemical reactions between those neurons and synaptic connections. A binary bit computer trying to replicate the functionality of what makes humans and biologic entities actually think, actually be conscious. That is something that I do not personally think that we are going to get until we get to the next level. And by the next level, we need something a little bit better at reasoning, at compute. I think quantum computing has a high potential, but we're still in our infancy with establishing and scaling quantum computing systems. So won't go down the rabbit hole of that, but personally, I see robotics and AI joining the workforce, taking over mundane tasks. You're talking about assembly line, factory jobs, and a lot of people are worried about job loss. My message that I want to get out there is don't be afraid of the imminent advances to human technology. It's going to be something where we work in symbiotic harmony with these advancing technologies, and it's going to make life better. Now, there are going to be some hurdles because there is going to be job loss, but think about it. Throughout history, job loss follows technological advancement. We're talking all the way back till the wheel. The wheel was invented. And guess what? The people who carried stuff around with the carts and everything, they were out of a job because the wheels replaced them. But when jobs are replaced, new ones are created. So what we're doing is we are eliminating the lower level mundane tasks. This might be a controversial viewpoint. I'd love to hear your take on this, but my personal thought process is humans are made for more. Your brain, your ingenuity is designed for more. You're capable for doing so much more with it. You should be creating, you should be doing, you should be thinking at a higher level. And it's sad to me when you have somebody who works their entire life 9 to 5 in a sweatshop on a mundane task that is really not stimulating their brain. They're on an assembly line taking a device from point A to point B over and over and over again. To me, that is one of the most sad things that I can possibly see, because that is a waste of human potential and ingenuity, because I know what that brain is capable of, even if that individual isn't aware. What I see, and then my rant is over.
Mine will just begin.
Perfect. And I do want your opinion and take on this as well. But what I see is robotics and AI is going to enhance human potential, because it's going to remove a lot of jobs and it's going to create opportunity. It's also economically going to drive down prices from manufacturing and logistics, and everything's going to be automated and robotic. So it will create opportunity. And I want to get your take first, because that's a whole nother can of worms, is what does the economic complexity look like as well?
I'll start by saying this conference I referenced a little while ago, they said that straight up in the next couple of years, AI will be contributing to the loss of probably 70 million jobs. They said in that same amount of time, though, it's going to create 100 million jobs. So it's like you just have to retrain for something else if you're super worried about it. But here's what I'll say about what you mentioned about humans were built for more, because this is the trend I see. I feel like AI is going to create another version of the haves and the have-nots. There's going to be such a wide disparity, because while AI is getting smarter and while we as society are becoming more technologically advanced, you have to recognize we're getting dumber, like as a species. There's so many skills we just don't have anymore because we have been so reliant on technology. Like when I was a little kid, I remember I was in the Boy Scouts for a minute and they showed you how to use a compass.
Yeah.
And we had to do the map and you had to figure that out. Well, a compass at one point was really high technology, right? A couple hundred years ago, like compass would have been like, whoa, you got one of those? That's cool. I feel like attention span and focus and creativity are going to be the new luxury items of the future, because with all the social media to distract us, all of the devices, all of the things to consume. The people who fall into that trap and constantly do that and don't improve themselves, those are going to be the folks who really get left behind. And the AI is going to be working for the folks who have more important, better creative stuff to do. And those are going to be the people benefiting from AI. I don't know. That's just the way I kind of see the future going. What do you think about that?
I've got a thought experiment for you.
Okay. I love it.
I believe that's a common misconception, and it's a valid one. Is technology making us dumber? Is it making us reliant on technology? So there's two things. So you are correct and you're incorrect, in my opinion. There's a difference between usable technology and distraction technology. For example, you mentioned a compass was high technology a couple hundred years ago, right? So the argument you could make is, what happened before the compass? You had to learn how to navigate. Without this compass that reads the magnetic field and tells you what's north, what's south, that made navigation significantly more simple. Before that, it required a lot more brain power. There's the sun. In my east, in my west, you had to learn to navigate. Now I'm in woods. I can't see the sun. How do I navigate? It takes a tremendous amount of more skill to navigate when you don't have a compass. Now you give somebody a compass, and that dramatically improves his capability to navigate, and he's going to do so probably a little bit more efficient than his counterparts. Now, does that make him lazy because he is no longer having to go through the mental processes? It simplified something. Having access to that compass simplified navigation. But does that mean that he is lazier or he is more efficient? And is it making him dumber or smarter because he's leveraging technology? My argument is using technology does not mean it makes you any less, like your mental capacity is diminished because you took a shortcut. All it does is enhance your capability, and now you can use your brain power instead of processing, am I facing east? Am I west? Where do I go? You instantly know I'm facing north. This is my trajectory. And you can use your brain power for other tasks, other things. Mm-hmm. Am I surrounded? Like, what are the dangers? Am I near a bear's ant's nest or a bear's den? So you can actually focus on higher level thinking because you simplified a basic task with technology. So now fast forward to what we have now. The exact same thing applies, with the exception of now we have a lot of social media, a lot of things that I would call distraction technology that is not usable. In most cases, obviously there are use cases. If your goal was to be an influencer, you can leverage that as a platform to actually create a business that's usable. But if you are sitting in bed and you're just scrolling and consuming information, you are not focusing on higher level thinking, you are getting distracted. But that same tool, when used correctly, can be beneficial. And I don't think that it's making you dumber. It's how you use the technology. And I think that just being able to develop new technology and progress human civilization, it will allow us the ability to do incredible, insane things in record time that we could never have done historically. But it can also be used for evil. We can take technology that can either make sonars and make things that will be beneficial or detrimental to human society, aka bombs that will drop and destroy. So my argument to finalize this thought experiment is we shouldn't be worried about technological progression in the sense that it will take away our ability to think, to reason. We should use it and then use our reasoning capabilities for higher level thinking to continue our own growth and expansion.
I think you hit it on the head, the distinction between technology that enhances life and enhances our abilities to engage with life, and then technology that allows us to essentially escape life and just kind of check out for a little while. I want to talk about something that I guess I realized it way late in the game. I think we're there, especially in this last election cycle. I truly didn't know what was real because it felt like things could be fabricated and look pretty real. I remember, as a case in point, okay, I live in North Carolina. We had that hurricane that didn't even, I don't even know if it touched North Carolina, but it sent so much rain and flooding that a couple 100 miles inland got devastated, and it was terrible. It wasn't even a couple of hours or even a day where I started seeing these photos, and I'm going to put air quotes up here for anyone not watching the video. They were photos. They look pretty real. I'm a photographer by trade, so I knew they were AI. They looked cartoonish to me. They looked generated. But to my friends, they're like, "Oh my God, did you see the picture of the little girl and her puppy and the canoe and her houses in the background?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you mean the AI pic?" And they were like, "Oh, no, that looks so real."
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's not. So are we at the point where we're just not going to know? I mean, how are we going to know if something's real if it's a news story? How do we know we're not being played? Because humans are kind of simple in the sense that seeing is believing. You know, you've heard that saying. So if we can see it, we're like, oh, it must be real. And I think we're at the point where that isn't a really good reaction anymore.
Yeah, we are getting closer and closer to that point. And again, that goes back to my statement of we should be chasing that. We want to get to that point where it's really difficult to distinguish, was this AI generated or was this a real life action movie that transpired before my eyes? You want to get to that point for multiple reasons, but it comes with its own set of moral dilemmas as well. Because in the hands of the wrong people, just like any technology, it can be used for misinformation. It can be used for harm to the general population and to trained eyes as well. It will get to a point where you, James, you know what's real, what's not currently. It will get to a point where it will be indistinguishable to you. You'll be looking at side-by-side photos. Your brain is the lights bouncing off and back into your retinas, your pupils, and you are analyzing it and saying, I cannot tell the difference. So it will get to that point. Will it be utilized inevitably by bad actors? Yes, it will. Every technology can be used for good, it can be used for evil, all the way back to a gun. And I won't get into that for political reasons, but a gun can be used to provide for your family, right? Obviously now we don't need that, but it can be used for good, it can be used for protection, or it can be used to go shoot somebody in cold blood on the street. Every technology has potential for good and potential for bad, depending on how it's utilized and who has access to it. I don't think that should be an inhibiting factor to continue to progress. I think progression needs to happen regardless of ill intent in the hands of the wrong parties. That said, how do you combat it? I think AI will solve itself, meaning when you finally have the technology where you can't personally, as a human, distinguish between what's real and what's not, I think AI needs to step in and do it for you. So there will be AI programs, and there already are, by the way. Currently, most people, at least the trained eyes, can distinguish between this is an AI-generated photo and this is not. But there are already AI programs where you can copy an image, paste it into a platform, and it will tell you whether or not it's AI-generated. That will just be enhanced, and it will need to stay in line, right? Stay updated, because as AI gets better at generating realistic photos and videos like Sora can do, I'm not sure if you've played around with that. Sora's, you can still tell that is AI generated, but pretty realistic looking. It's very good for the early iterations of the tech, but it's going to continue to get better. So as it gets better, we just need to make sure that simultaneously we're developing essentially the AI fact checkers. Just run it through a program that will tell you whether or not it's AI generated. And I think that's going to be something that may even need to be implemented into Google itself, into the algorithms, where it will fact check itself and say, this is an AI generated photo, this is not.
Also, like Amazon, if you're going to buy an audiobook, you can say this book was written by AI, not really a person. And because that's a thing now. Well, we talked a lot about technology in general. We talked about the good and the bad, but I'm curious to know, as deep into technology and as interested in technology as you are, what's the technology that you're most excited about right now?
Ooh. Genetics. The understanding of what makes us humans and what makes us tick. The human body is so complex. The complexity is astronomical. We're talking about 33 trillion cells in a typical human body that's replicating through mitosis. Cells die, cells are reborn, cells replicate. It's incredible the amount of molecular machinery that goes into a single cell. A single cell, one of those 33 trillion cells that make up you, James, just within one single muscle cell or skin cell, you have thousands of mitochondria, you have all these molecular machineries that are reading DNA, transcribing DNA, creating proteins. So millions of chemical reactions happening in a tiny cell. It's incredible. So we're at the point finally with AI and the technology that we have, we're finally able to look intrinsically, look at ourselves and determine, okay, what makes us tick? Now, how do we take that and use it to our benefit? Meaning, I believe in a world that is not too dystopian, that we're talking about within the next decade, where we have the ability to reverse aging. We're already doing it in mice. We're doing it in primates. We can actually take your human skin cell and reprogram it to any other cell that we want. It's called induced pluripotent state, iPS cells, where we can actually, before it was differentiated into a liver cell, a skin cell, a heart cell, we can then reprogram it to any other cell that we want. That's an incredible technology, because imagine the implications there. Thousands of people die every day waiting for an organ transplant, right? So first it has to be in close proximity, somebody else has to die, it has to be a perfect match, yada yada. There's so much that goes into it, and then it has to get to you in time. So imagine the organ transplant list is eradicated, gone, because we can now have the technology to take your cells, your DNA, and grow. You need a new kidney? Here's a kidney. And by the way, it won't be rejected because it's using your DNA to build it. So it will save countless lives just with that technology alone. And we're seeing incredible things, but the ability to understand the incredible complexity that we are built on and then start to manipulate it. Now, obviously, that opens a huge can of worms of how can the genetic engineering be a bad thing, right? Again, goes back to, in the wrong hands, can it be a bad tool? Absolutely. But the amount of good, the pros that go into this dramatically outweigh the potential ramifications of bad actors getting a hold of this technology and using it to build super soldiers.
Right.
James, we're not going to need to worry about super soldiers. It's like if that's a use of very expensive technology, it's going to be a little bit too late. That would have been helpful 100 years ago, 50 years ago, but now we're going to have we're going to have humanoid robots that we can send out onto the front lines instead of having to waste our own biological corpses. So I see the benefits far outweighing the potential negative ramifications, and not just from a medical perspective, but imagine if we have the capability to take your genome, which, by the way, back in 2000, when the first human genome was sequenced, it was a multinational operation, many different countries, billions of dollars to do this. Now I can go sequence your entire genome for a couple grand. Right? So it's significant improvements there, and we know exactly how to do it. So imagine sequencing every baby's genome and knowing, like seeing exactly what the probability, you have a 50% probability of developing colon cancer within your lifetime because you have a genetic predisposition. I am able to remove that predisposition so that it increases the probability of a healthy life. A lot of people say that we shouldn't do that because it's playing God. I believe that if you have the capability to do good, you should use that technology. If this person has a high probability of developing all the precursors, the markers that show that they're going to get early onset Alzheimer's, doesn't mean they're going to. High probability though, based on all of this research and data. So we can actually remove that and make sure that you are healthy. I believe that there needs to be checks and balances in place, and I think it needs to stick to medical applications, meaning nothing cosmetic, right? You shouldn't want to change how you look, give yourself blue eyes, blonde hair. Like that's just going a little bit too far. Now, are designer babies possible? Sure. Absolutely. We can do that with genetic manipulation. But for me, the big thing here is just knowing that you're giving your baby the best chance at a long, healthy life from a genetic perspective with a readily available treatment.
That kind of cuts into the ethical piece of it, because our business model, if you want to call it that, in our medical industrial complex, at least in our country of the US, it's not really built on curing anything. It's built on treating indefinitely. So if you have a condition, well, we're going to give you a therapy for it. We're going to give you a treatment, or we're going to give you a pharmaceutical for it. But we're not really interested in giving you a cure for it, because then you're not a customer anymore. So what's the incentive for tech companies to come in and try to eradicate a disease or cure anything? Where's the money in that?
Oh, the money is plentiful. If you cured cancer tomorrow, are you going to make as much money as the pharmaceuticals that, again, they want to keep you sick, right? A lot of the pharmaceutical companies, they just love to, how long, what's the LTV that we can get, lifetime value of this drug, right? They want to pump as much of it into you as possible. But if you were a tech company that had figured out a genetically induced protein that will decrease your probability of developing breast cancer by X, now that's not going to, it's going to be separate from medical treatments and pharmaceuticals, because you have genetic and then you have epigenetic. So from a baby, we took away certain factors that increase the probability of you developing any sort of cancer, but let's call it lung. Does that mean that if you go and start chain smoking throughout your life, that you're not going to develop cancer because you're introducing carcinogens voluntarily into your system? No. All it's doing is increasing the probability. So they're going to be initially two separate things. So what you can do is offer these genetic treatments that will eradicate any predispositions genetically and potentially save your life. It's just going to make you the healthiest version of you genetically. But if you go get hit by a car, you're still going to die. If you are doing something stupid with a chainsaw, you might lose a foot. So it's not going to completely take away the pharmaceutical companies, because if you still develop cancer, is there a possibility to cure it genetically? Yes. However, retroactively curing, we're making leaps and bounds, and retroactively, it once you develop cancer, how can we take that and eradicate it? Eradicating the disease, there's a lot of money. You're talking billions of dollars, because all you have to do is have a higher price point. Whether or not insurance kicks in, or you have to pay out of pocket, or you make it black market, that's obviously an economical discussion for once we achieve the result. But inevitably, you're going to have multiple options. So if you develop lung cancer because you smoke 2 packs a day, you go in and talk to your doctor, and right now they'll tell you, hey, here's an experimental drug that is going through human trials right now. I can't recommend it because we don't have the data, blah, 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 but it's on the table if you wanted me to get you into this trial. Or we can go this route, and here's what your prognosis looks like. You've got 6 months to live, probability of you got to go through chemo. So they're going to give you options. This is just going to layer that with an additional option. In the long-term future, we're talking about 30 to 50 years before we can definitively eradicate all diseases when you get it. It's like you'll walk into a clinic, boom, you're done. But in the short term, we're talking the next 10 to 20 years, it's going to be an and, not a complete eradication of the pharmaceutical industry.
You gave me a visual in my head just a second ago when 50 years from now, you can walk into a clinic, and I just imagine you downloading the cure to whatever you have, because we'll essentially be computers at that point. Which leads me to wanting to ask you, all of these advances in technology, and then we start using them on ourselves more and more. At what point do you feel like we kind of lose our humanity in that? Like we cease to be the humans we have always been because we're depending on this outside thing, this third party, which is the technology that we brought into ourselves.
Well, that's already happening, James. Every generation, we're not the humans of before. Whether you believe in creation or evolution, evolution is something that you cannot challenge. Now, origin, we're not going to get into that. Where we came from, that's a different topic altogether. Whether we were by intelligent design, whether we came here from primordial soup, none of those negate the fact that evolution is an actual process that we evolve as humans over time. We are designed to adapt to different environments. You go through an ice age, we're going to be completely different humans to have survived that ice age. Global warming happens. Our bodies are going to adapt to the new environment. That's how we are cellularly and from a DNA perspective designed. So it already happens. All this is going to do is accelerate that evolutionary process. So we as humans are already generation over generation becoming more advanced, more genetically perfect, even though obviously there is no perfect genetics out there. Sorry, Brad Pitt, you're close. And there are some people that will definitely show me pictures of beautiful women, beautiful men, and say, nope, I beg to differ. But from a genetic perspective, we're not perfect. We're far from perfect. And that's also by design. If we were perfect, we wouldn't continue to evolve and adapt. So by design, we're constantly doing that. What technology is going to allow us to do when we're making these experiments on ourselves and we're actually accelerate that evolutionary process. So we as humans are already generation over generation becoming more advanced, more genetically perfect, even though obviously there is no perfect genetics out there. Sorry, Brad Pitt, you're close. And there are some people that will definitely show me pictures of beautiful women, beautiful men, and say, no, I beg to differ. But from a genetic perspective, we're not perfect. We're far from perfect. And that's also by design. And if we were perfect, we wouldn't continue to evolve and adapt. So by design, we're constantly doing that. What technology is going to allow us to do when we're making these experiments on ourselves and we're actually making better versions of ourselves, that's what we're here to do, right? That's why we're on this earth, is to become better, to advance. Now, it does come along with many ethical considerations, of course, like people will say, how far is too far? Like, should we introduce brain-computer interfaces? Or it does becoming transhumanism and implementing machine learning technology in with biological processes, is that where we draw the red line, right? So how far is too far? That's obviously a discussion that might take a follow-up conversation from us. But my thought process is any technology that makes us better versions of ourselves, generation over generation, should be progressed and should be implemented with obvious consideration to what are the negatives, what are the downsides. How far is too far? Is there some sort of dystopian universe where, not too far, where we are half machine, half human, and where do you draw that ethical boundary? That's TBD, and I can't really shed too much light on it, but to give you an idea, I won't be first in line. I'll let people get the bugs out first, but yeah. Brain-computer interfaces are fascinating, not to go down the rabbit hole, but just the ability to, by the way, we're already doing that. We already have access to it in the form of a phone. You're bypassing that and removing the boundary and just making it a part of yourself so you constantly have access to it. I mean, show me a teenager today that doesn't have access to their phone or it out of their hand for 2 seconds, and I'll make the argument that that's already where we're going. We're already cyborgs. This is just taking it one step further. I believe that brain-computer interfaces are a good thing. It's going to be incredible what we can achieve just by removing the barriers there. That's step one to transhumanism, of course. It's like, what does that look like in the future? Time will tell.
Yeah, time will tell. And we've got plenty of sci-fi movies that have taken a stab at what it could look like. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for this conversation. This has been really cool. I don't have very many, well, I don't think I've ever had a conversation about technology on the podcast before. So I was on the edge of my seat. I really like to talk about, theorize where things are going. And I'm not in that world like you are. So things you look at me and you're like, yeah, that's been going on for like 3 years. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I'm just catching up to it, I guess. So it's cool to talk to people who are in the thick of it. And that's you. And I appreciate you being here for that conversation. If someone wants to keep up with the work that you do, what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is always going to be the easiest. There's not that many of us out there, so type in Steven Zeller into LinkedIn. I should be first one that pops up there, and just shoot me a request if you wanted to continue a conversation, you had an interesting thought, or you're in tech and you have a pitch deck you want me to take a look at. Happy to have a conversation with anybody that reaches out to me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Steven, thank you so much again for being here.
James, it was a pleasure. Good conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining me today. If you've enjoyed this content and are thinking about ways to share your story or even get more joy out of your life, I have a free ebook that I'd love to share with you. It's called Plotting Your Joyful Rebellion, and I designed it to be a 5-step field guide full of guerrilla warfare tactics to help prepare you to overthrow any of the parts of your life you feel the call to rebel against. Go to ajoyfulrebellion.com and click on the link right there at the top to claim your free copy of the book. Again, that's ajoyfulrebellion.com, or simply hit the link at the top of the show notes. What sort of rebellion are you plotting right now? I'd love to hear about it. Connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, or through the website at ajoyfulrebellion.com. Thanks again for listening today, and be sure to stop by next week for another episode full of joyful rebellion.